And our shout out tonight for our rookie journalist who showed right away on his very first assignment he's a real pro, diving into the use of solitary confinement for prisoners, a practice that many leading criminologists say amounts to torture when used over long periods of time. The untold story of what was happening in the Tennessee prison system to women as young as 16 was the first story ever published by a graduate student named Alan Arthur.
I mean, outside of a class assignment, a couple class assignments, this was by far the biggest thing I had ever written and the first thing I had really published.
What Arthur discovered with a team from the Tennessean newspaper and USA Today was dozens of women locked up in solitary confinement for months and months, simply because they had medical conditions or behavioral issues local jails could not accommodate.
My first thought was sort of disbelief, but then the more I learned about it, the more I started to feel, if not injustice, definitely a sense of a sadness that a lot of people were stuck in this position.
Arthur, who is active in trying to help people who have been in prison with a streaming video art show, connected with a whistleblower to help him. Dr. Ali Winters, a senior clinical therapist who helped him and his readers understand the toll of lengthy solitary confinement.
Everybody changes. Everybody. You cannot go into a human being cannot go into solitary confinement and not change.
I don't think I was the first person she tried to reach out to. I might have been the least likely, a grad school journalism student in New York City. But for whatever reason, nobody else ran with it, and I did, and fortunately we were able to make some impact.
Arthur's printed stories and a companion video produced by the Tennessean and the nonprofit Marshall Project told a compelling story featuring the plight of some of the women who had been through it.
She said, you're in prison, committed a crime. I said, I've not been found guilty of that crime yet.
It's never easy to hear people. In these cases, I'm pretty much asking people to recount the worst moment of their life, and sometimes the worst years of their life. And it certainly takes a mental toll on them, and it takes a mental toll on me. Any journalist who's reported on this kind of thing can vouch for that. And I cared about these people, some of them had done bad things in their lives for sure, but I felt for them and believed they deserved their day in court.
But as a rookie investigative journalist, Arthur says he was worried he wasn't up to the task.
I thought, maybe I'm just not good enough to do this, and that it would be a real disservice to these people to put this amateur basically on this thing, which is essentially their lives, that I had to get it right, because if I didn't, they're recounting these very painful things that they've never had a chance to talk about. And if I botched that, I would never forgive myself.
His stories became big news in Tennessee, helping lead to the release of some of the teenagers who had been locked up in solitary confinement.
A 16-year-old is out of prison tonight after a nonprofit paid her $60,000 bail. Fox 13's Zach Crenshaw was there as Rosalind Holmes reunited with some of her family members.
In her slippers and khakis, 16-year-old Rosalind Bird was on the outside for the first time in more than 3 months.
I'm thankful for the people that paid my bond.
And the stories led to a new law signed by the governor that essentially curbed the practice for minors and ordered better oversight when involving adults.
The legislation that was introduced as a result was introduced by a Democrat and a Republican, so it was pretty bipartisan. And the governor said, I'll sign it. The idea that maybe one person or two people could get out of solitary confinement because of this, I think it was a responsibility to them, a responsibility to Dr. Winters for what she had witnessed, which takes its own toll. I think that was in the forefront of my mind, was just, you can't let these people down. They stuck it out through this. The least you can do is finish this story.
And you did.
I did. I finished it in the hospital room the night my son was born, while my wife and baby were asleep.
A life-changing moment for everyone involved. Congratulations, Alan Arthur, on your son and your story. Well, that's our program for tonight. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next week. Good night.